So this figure shows freshwater scarcity and stress related to not enough water being available. Please understand that there is enough fresh water on the planet for 7 billion people, but it's distributed unevenly and too much of it is wasted, polluted, or unsustainably managed. Freshwater scarcity stress is a calculation that compares the freshwater availability with the amount used by humans. Freshwater scarcity stress is faced by the world's major river systems. The World Resource Institute Aqueduct Project recently evaluated the water risk ranked by population and area for 180 countries. Studies showed that 36 countries are facing extremely high level of water stress, which means more than 80% of the water available to agriculture, domestic, and industrial users is withdrawn annually, leaving businesses, farms, and communities vulnerable to scarcity or lack of available water resources. In 263 of the world's water basins, 2 or more countries share the available freshwater supplies, and this sharing of freshwater water supplies is not always on a friendly basis. So areas that are colored in red, orange, or yellow are indications of high, moderate, and medium stress, and those colored in green indicate no stress, and gray we are lacking data. So even in the United States, west of the Mississippi River watershed, we have areas of high and moderate freshwater scarcity stress. Northern Africa, as well as Western Asia, a portion of Australia, the southern tip of Africa, and even some parts of South America. So it's not evenly distributed around the world, but there are definitely areas with freshwater scarcity stress. The World Resources Institute has come up with a global map of water stress by country with projected water stress up through the year 2040 based on some climate models and socioeconomic scenarios. Global water demand is likely to highly increase in the upcoming decades because of fast population growth. Also, climate change was taken into consideration with these projections. The results shows that almost every country's water stress will increase, some more rapidly than others. About half of the countries in extremely high water stress are located in the Middle East area, with the darker color shading, including 9 considered extremely high stress with a score of 100% in the top 10. These 9 countries are Bahrain, Kuwait, Palestine, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Lebanon. They also found that portions of Chile, Estonia, Namibia, Botswana could face a significant increase in water stress by 2040 compared to other countries. By 2050, some 60 countries will experience such stress. So the United States is also included in this. And please note that water stress was defined as ratio of withdrawals to the available water supply in that particular region. The U.S. is likely showing up in a high stress scenario because we have such high water usage and lack water conservation techniques. So let's talk about surface water resources. Surface water resources include our lakes, our rivers, and our streams. When we overdraw our surface water resources, it impacts the environment. So when the demand for water exceeds the actual available supply, a shortage or an overdraw occurs. Water shortages are most prevalent in areas that receive less amounts of precipitation. However, water shortages can also occur where demand exceeds existing water supplies. So, if the effects of surface water diversion include reducing the surface water flow downstream, which in turn reduces the number of aquatic species, reducing natural flow of nutrients to floodplains, river deltas, and estuaries, reducing the size of wetland and estuary habitats, interfering with fish spawning migrations, and finally, poor water quality. Much of the water removed from streams and aquifers to serve human needs never returns to its source. For example, over 80% of the agricultural water applied to crops for irrigation purposes evaporates. Hence, many rivers can flow at a fraction of their natural flow during high water demand periods. An example of this is the Colorado River. The Colorado River has water being siphoned off of it in order to provide irrigation to farms and also water supply to cities. So, by the time the Colorado River reaches the sea, it's just a mere trickle. So much for the mighty Colorado River. Also, the vast wetlands at the mouth of the Colorado River have been reduced significantly because of the decreased river flow. In addition, the Colorado River has a salt content of over 800 parts per million when it reaches Mexico, versus the 40 parts per million at its headwaters. This salt concentration is toxic to many plants, hence it can't even be used for agriculture unless it's diluted or desalinated. Also, drinking water has to have a salt content below 500 parts per million. So again, the Colorado River salt content at Mexico is greater than what's allowed for drinking water. In addition, in the San Francisco Bay Area, over 60% of the fresh water that once flowed from the river into the bay has been diverted for irrigation and municipal use. Without the freshwater flows, saltwater intrudes into the bay and the estuary is now more salty. Chinook salmon are almost non-existent, as are other species that are being impacted for the increase in salt content. So, how do we increase our freshwater supplies? Well, we could focus on utilizing groundwater resources instead of surface water resources, but there needs to be a balance here because groundwater overdraft also has consequences. We could build dams and then create large reservoirs that we can utilize during dry seasons for our water supply needs, but dams also have impact on the environment as well. We could transport surface water through enclosed aqueducts instead of open channel systems where much of the water can be lost to evaporation. So enclosed aqueducts would help decrease evaporation loss. In addition, industries can pursue different efforts to recapture, purify, and recycle the water that they use, such as putting in place a closed-loop water system so that they don't have to pull from a source or discharge to a receiving stream, but instead recycle the water in a closed-loop system within the industry itself. They can also recapture and purify water and focus on using gray water as a possible source of water. Gray water is water that stems from laundry or dishes as opposed to from toilet flushing. Desalination is always an option that people like to consider. That's when you convert salty water to fresh water, but the cost is really high and the resulting salty brine has to be disposed of without harming aquatic or land ecosystems. The desalination process includes distillation, reverse osmosis. There's over 13,000 desalination plants in about 125 countries, especially in the arid nations of the Middle East, Northern Africa, and the Mediterranean. But again, they're highly costly and they can cause impact to the coastal marine ecosystem. In addition, they create a large amount of brine waste that needs to be disposed of properly. The last bullet on your screen refers to water conservation. The best option for all of this is water conservation and improving water efficiency. In the U.S. homes, toilet flushing is the single largest use of domestic freshwater. If we were to install low-flow toilet shower heads and faucets, that would help decrease the amount of water that we use. Also, fixing water leaks or using gray water drip smart sprinkler systems on landscaping instead of fresh water. Replacing lawns with native drought-tolerant plants that need little watering also could help us be more efficient with our water use. And then using gray water from bathtubs, showers, and sinks, and dishwashers and clothes washers for landscaping watering can also help decrease our need for fresh water. In Los Angeles, there's plans to build large ponds to capture winter rainfall from streets and roofs and run it through coastal wetlands for transfer into drinking water. So, there's definitely techniques that we can employ that can improve our water efficiency and help us to conserve water and make better use of the water that's available. This graphic pertains to irrigation technologies used in agricultural industry. Traditional irrigation methods rely on gravity and flowing water, which is depicted here on the left side of the diagram. Newer systems such as the center pivot or the low pressure sprinkler irrigation system and drip irrigation are far more efficient. Drip irrigation is the most efficient at 90 to 95% efficiency with very little loss due to evaporation. The center pivot system is about 80% efficient with low pressure sprinkler and 90 to 95% with the LIPA sprinkler. Again, it decreases the amount of water loss to evaporation. Gravity flow, on the other hand, which is a common system that's utilized in areas where there's an aqueduct system or a nearby river, and about 40% of the water can be lost to evaporation. So this is not the most efficient approach. This slide pertains to the Aral Sea, which lies between Kazakhstan in northern Asia and Uzbekistan in the south. This map depicts the location of the Aral Sea in 1970 in the light blue color, and then the dark blue color depicts the location of the Aral Sea in 2008. The cause of the water depletion for the Aral Sea was due to poorly designed irrigation systems. It used to be one of the largest lakes in the world, and its size has shrunk down to 10% of its original size because of using the water for irrigation. In addition, two other reasons for the lake's depleted water supply are reasons for other lakes or rivers losing water. They are population growth and the rise of technology in developing countries. Water is needed to process meat and water grass for cows to eat, and it takes an average of 1,800 gallons of water per 1 pound of beef. So you can see here that we've got boats that are completely on dry land, which was an area that was once covered by water as part of the Aral Sea. So this graphic is depicting how the size of the Aral Sea changed over time from 1960 to 2009. The tan boundary depicts its location from the 1960 time frame. And you can see that the Aral Sea has definitely decreased in size to 10% of its original size. And then this is a picture from 1976, and then 30 years later, 2006. The Aral Sea salinity has risen 7 times greater than what it was in the past, as the average level of its water dropped by 72 feet. The area's fishing industry has been completely devastated, and winds now pick up the sand and salty dust and blow it onto the fields as far as 300 miles away, which also impacts the ability for them to even farm. The area's climate is actually altered. The once huge sea acted as a thermal buffer that moderated the heat of the summer and the extreme cold of the winter, and now there's less rain. Summers are hotter and drier, and winters are colder, and the growing season has shortened. The combination of such climate change and severe salinization has reduced crop yields by 50% on almost a third of the area's cropland. That's the complete opposite of the project's intended consequences, when they originally thought taking water from the Aral Sea would help the farmland. Many of the 45 million people living in the Aral Sea watershed have had health problems from a combination of toxic dust, salt, and contaminated water. Since 1999, the United Nations and the World Bank has spent over $600 million trying to purify the drinking water and upgrade the irrigation and drainage systems in the area. The 5 countries surrounding the lake and its 2 feeder river systems have worked to improve irrigation efficiency and to partially replace water-thirsty crops with others that require less irrigation water. The Aral Sea basin has been stabilized, but nevertheless, experts expect the largest portion of the Aral Sea to continue to shrink. The satellite photos on the right tell a story in themselves, that as the lake shrank is split into 2 lakes and left behind a salty desert, economic ruin, increasing health problems, and severe ecological disruption.